I'm going to go ahead and get things rolling with our introductions today. So I appreciate everyone joining us. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I know it's busy for everyone, but I'm excited about our content, and I think you're going to find it insightful. My name is Christopher Cruz, and I'm with the marketing team here at InterVision. And as you may be aware, InterVision is a strategic service provider with only over 25 years of experience helping organizations transform through the power of technology. During today's session, our expert will be discussing the 7 golden rules of cloud migration and sharing insights to ensure a successful journey to the cloud. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to get a few housekeeping details out of the way. First, you may notice that your microphones are muted. We'll have quite a few participants today. But if you do have questions at any time during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat functionality or the Q&A functionality. And when there's an opportune moment in the presentation, I'll chime in and let our presenter know about the question, and we can get an answer for you. If for any reason we can't get the answer to you on the webinar today, we will certainly follow up with you via email. Also, after the webinar, you'll get the opportunity to download some follow-up content, as well as an opportunity to get your hands on a recording of today's information, today's presentation, in case you would like to re-review. With that out of the way, I'd like to introduce today's presenter. Our presenter today is John Gray, and John has nearly 30 years of experience aligning business strategy with IT operations across a wide spectrum of industries. He's worked in progressive technology environments from mainframe to the web. John has designed numerous applications and system integration architectures as part of multi-million-dollar initiatives for public and private sector organizations. He was an early cloud adopter and is respected as a thought leader in the cloud and in emerging technologies. So John, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you so you can get things started.
Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks for that nice introduction there. I hope I can live up to that. Yeah, I'm the CTO of Infinity Consulting Group that is now an InterVision company. I'm one of 2 co-founders of the company, of Infinity, about 15 years ago. I've got lots of experience in software, and over the last, half a decade or more, really completely focused on the cloud, which has really taken off for us and obviously taken off in the world in general. But, like all IT projects, not all of them go well. So, yeah, interesting stat here from InfoWorld, that 20% of cloud migration projects are in trouble. Various reasons for this, the lift and shift approach that they're following, which I'll get into more later, is not working. Data integration is something we're seeing is increasingly becoming an issue with more cloud migrations. And, security is not addressed enough up front. So, like most IT projects, if they go well, they're wonderful, but, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So you really need to sort of focus on what are the things that you really need to have in place and think about before you kind of take the leap. So we're going to go over 7 different rules here that we've come up with, to some degree from sort of, lessons learned and, some of the things that have maybe not gone so well for some of our clients where we've come in, picked things up, and, kind of distilling those into lessons learned, new rules, ways to look at things. So the first of which is strategy, cloud strategy. Second, then really thinking about the right kind of migration for your organization. Then how to segment your applications in a way that lends itself to migrations. Security is always kind of job zero these days, right, with IT, absolutely paramount. And then, strategically thinking about how to move your assets and your workloads into the cloud, focusing on backup and disaster recovery, and then understanding the interdependencies early on before you discover them by accident later. So I'm going to hit on each of these in more detail now. But before we sort of jump to that, are you really ready for the cloud? Is is there a perfect time to transition from on-site? Well, I mean, the costs are really leveling off now, and the actual cost of running in the cloud still continues to go down, but the costs of migrating are kind of leveling off. Security is very strong, better than ever. So I think, the benefits are clear, and once you get there, the convenience and availability are really, second to none. So, absolutely, it's a good time to be moving to the cloud. So, how do you go about this, right? Do you go all at once? Do you migrate mission critical apps only? And then, to do this, do you have the buy-in from your management? Do you have buy-in from your end users? What cultural changes, cultural shifts are going to need to happen to make this work well? So these are some of the, the questions we kind of think about and talk with our clients about to see where they're at, really. Are they really ready? Have they thought through the things they need to? And have they put a strategy into place? Because it's a whole lot easier to kind of talk these things through ahead of time before you start doing them. And so, the reasons to change are, there's quite a few, and they're compelling. There's agility and flexibility and increased accessibility, all the abilities here. Once you get into the cloud, costs can be reduced, although I wouldn't say that is the first and foremost reason I would recommend people go into the cloud. If you're, as many organizations are, digitally transforming your entire business to take better advantage of technology to make you successful, the cloud is a big part of that. And then there are many other reasons. Capacity and hardware are a big part of it. Are you shutting down a data center? Do you have equipment lease coming up? Is your existing hardware aging out? Those are all reasons to sort of pull the trigger. Have you, is your business growing? Do you have a sudden need for, new big capacity needs? Other reasons could be, competitive. Is the perceived competition, are your competitors in the cloud and moving quickly and, starting to beat you out? Have you gone through a merger and acquisition? Does everybody that merged has different technologies, and now is the time to sort of integrate and clean things up by moving to the cloud? Improving security. Moving to the cloud is absolutely a great chance to improve your security, reduce cost. And many organizations, both public and private now, have a cloud-first directive that's been handed down to them. So, it really is something that people are taking on. So once you sort of really start to take this on, what are the things you want to think about? Well, taking advantage of cloud-native features such as auto-scaling, serverless computing, things like that can really, really get you, to the leading edge of things. So if you're going to make the move, you really want to be thinking about those. Once you get out into the cloud, big data analytics and artificial intelligence become a whole lot more viable because, the cloud can allow you to put enormous compute and storage horsepower under, applications and artificial intelligence engines for short periods of time, and then you can shut the environments down. So there's tremendous value in this area, and that's something we do quite a lot of. Are you an organization that has, very large fluctuating workloads? We do work with large tax departments, for example, who obviously have, huge amounts of tax returns coming in a couple of times a year and can scale up, their infrastructure enormously and then scale it back down out of that seasonal workload. Many organizations that we talk to and have, talked to over the last few years, the first area we start talking about with cloud adoption is disaster recovery, because they don't have anything or didn't have anything existing, and the cloud is just a great place to implement disaster recovery, and then sort of go into full migration after that. So the process and the steps in cloud migration are somewhat similar to typical IT projects. There's pre-migration, migration readiness and planning, and then the actual migration itself. So in the pre-migration, you're inventorying what it is you're going to be moving. You can use the third-party tools that we use. We've got our own Infinity automation framework, where we've got components that we reuse to help us gather inventory and gather information about networks and things like that. And then obviously developing and making sure you've got the business case clearly defined and communicated across your organization, so everybody understands that this is not just changing technology for technology's sake. It's really going to have a bottom line value to improving how you're doing business, making your organization more agile and competitive, those kinds of reasons. So getting all of that in shape before you do the migration is important. Then the readiness and planning. This phase is very important. I always tell our teams that we really can't know too much about an organization's environment, applications, and servers because there's always some hidden gotchas in there somewhere. And so we use tools to do automated discovery. We've got our own automation framework that we use. We do application dependency mapping, so we understand all the interdependencies between applications before we start moving them. And then we're well prepared then to move into the migration. And depending on the approach that we take, we can take a pretty much fully automated approach. If we're rehosting, lifting and shifting, we can use tools that automate that. Or if we're doing, replatforming and refactoring, and there's more steps involved. But to the degree possible, we always leverage automation, spend the time to build out automated approaches ahead of time, and then reuse things that we've done in the past. And then obviously validation is the final key step there to make sure before you throw the switch that everything is indeed working. So doing the right kind of migration for your organization, given where you're at this point in time, is an important thing to consider. What was right for one organization is not necessarily right for another. So there's an approach that Gartner originally came out with something they called the 6 R's of cloud migration a few years back. 4 of the R's are rehost, replatform, re-architect, and refactor. The other 2 retire applications, and retain is the other one where you keep it on site, on-prem. The ones the different ways we look at applications for migration is rehosting is the simplest, and I'll go through each of these in more detail in a minute. It's the quickest, but it really gives you the least best outcome in many ways from an agility standpoint. Replatforming is, a little more time-consuming, a bit more cost, and gets you into a slightly better place. Re-architect and refactor are, 2 different ways, really. Re-architect is software as a service. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And there's good reasons to do that, and then there's downsides to it. Refactoring, in many ways, is the optimal way to go, if that's what you need. And I'll talk through that in a minute. The other side of things you want to think about, as you start migration, is really how are you going to be building out your environment. We do a lot of work in AWS and Azure, and are starting Google, too. And we look at how we build out the equivalent to a data center, really. So we're looking, various different disciplines here: networking, security, auditing, tagging, having a VPN WAN strategy, because often there's hybrid architectures involved, at least for a while. So we move through all of these areas when we design an architecture prior to actual migration. So, most common type of migration in many cases is rehosting, lifting and shifting servers, where we will take existing servers and migrate them using automation tools into a equivalent infrastructure as a service solution in the cloud. So this is the fastest way to go, and it typically minimizes the risk because we're essentially copying a server at a block-by-block basis into the cloud. It's being converted from one format to another, but it's a pretty straightforward thing these days. The downside to this is that you bring any technical debt that you have with you. So if you've got a server that's not set up very well, that has some issues, you're going to bring that with you. But if you're trying to get out of a data center lease, and you need to move quickly, this is the way to go. Moving on to replatform, if you've got, say, servers running Windows 2003 and you really want to, get those upgraded, or you've got an old version of Oracle or SQL Server running, this can be a good time to do it. So in this case, we build out the cloud infrastructure and upgrade the operating systems, upgrade the database management system or other components. Obviously, this starts to introduce a little more risk because, as we know that software vendors may say everything's backward compatible, but, sometimes there are things that come up when you do a operating system upgrade or a database management system upgrade that need to be found and tested and figured out. If you've got software that's using some very sort of, odd kind of features of software, then, this is when you find it. So what we will do is start with a lower non-production environment and migrate that first and find any issues there, and then move on to production once we've figured out what those are and how to deal with them. So the next way of migrating is re-architecting, which is moving your from an application that's either COTS or homegrown into software as a service, and this can be a very compelling way to go. Because all you have to do is migrate your data. That alone can be significant work, though, depending on what your database contains. The downside we've seen with this is as clients migrate to a number of different SaaS solutions for different vendors for the various line of business applications, is that data integration across those applications then becomes a problem because they're sitting in different SaaS solutions. So they're somewhat siloed. Which may work just fine for your organization, but if you need a lot of data integrated across your different applications, then you really need to think about how you're going to do that if you're using SaaS solutions. Refactoring is where you take your applications and you really sort of re-architect and rebuild them to take advantage of cloud-native features such as auto-scaling, serverless computing, containers, all of the things that the cloud can bring to you in the way of elasticity and the great benefits of the cloud. So, in many cases, this is the ideal scenario, but it will take you probably the longest and it will cost the most, right? But in the end, you have a lot more agility, and you're really in the, leading the pack, so to speak. So, okay. So segmenting and prioritizing your application into tiers before you migrate is an important thing to do. We do business impact analysis, that type of work with clients where we'll come in and we'll look at all their applications and where, we've got clients who have got mandated disaster recovery and things like that. We will go through this formally. With other clients, we can go through this pretty quickly and not in such a formal way. But irrespective, it really is important for you to understand which are your mission-critical applications, which ones are of somewhat less importance, and which ones are truly of lower importance. This can help with, like I was saying, disaster recovery, but also which of these areas do you tackle from a migration standpoint? Which do you tackle first? And it can be, you can start at the top or you can start at the bottom. It really depends on what the triggers are and what's driving you. But understanding how quickly you need these different types of applications to recover in the event of a disaster, and those types of things help understand the type of architecture that you need to put under them as you migrate to the cloud. So, job zero is security, right? So paying attention to security before and during the transition is very important. Understanding, if you're an organization that has PHI or other sensitive information, if you're under HIPAA or something like that, then your environments need to be architected and built in a way that is going to meet those policies. So otherwise, you stand to have a lot of bad things happen potentially. Data loss. Obviously reputation is a big deal. We've seen big organizations like Sony and others that have been never really recovered from security break-ins. So, it is something that, for me as a CTO, this is one of the things that keeps me up at night for our organization and for our clients. Are we staying ahead on security? And, touch wood, we are, but it is an area that is an ongoing, constant, area of focus. So, as you think about security, you think about prevention, detection. You have to think about restoration, because to some degree it's, not a matter of if you're going to have some sort of break-in. It's, it is going to happen. How are you going to restore from it? How are you going to recover? And then making sure everybody in the organization is educated and informed, because everybody who works, is in business these days pretty much is using technology in some form or another, so they stand to be impacted by security break-ins, right? So we've got to really make sure that everybody knows what to do and how to avoid security issues. Standards can help a lot. We've done a lot of NIST assessments for organizations, and whether they're in the cloud or not, a lot of this is around non-technical things about having security, about having people trained and those sort of things. So, it's a good time to kind of look at these sort of things as you migrate to the cloud. It gives you a clean starting point, right? Security by design is a philosophy that we've followed for a while now. It's been adopted by some of the the cloud vendors. It really sort of focuses on security in a multidimensional way, defining a strategy from a security standpoint, looking at stakeholders, identifying your workloads, rationalizing your security requirements, understanding your data protection and controls, having an actual documented security architecture, which then everybody is aware of, building and deploying that architecture and continuing to automate security operations. This is kind of a key thing if you've got DevSecOps, where you've got automated security within your process. Continuing to monitor, obviously, for any issues. Testing, game day testing, important thing to do. And then audit and certification if certification is needed, but certainly auditing and looking at the outcomes of the audit is important. So, number 5, being strategic about which assets you're moving and when and with what resources. So, because everybody's, these days always is busy, right? They've got their day jobs, they're running their existing systems. So, if you're taking on a cloud migration, you're taking on additional work. You're going to identify the people you need and, get them involved. But this is a good time to pull in a strategic service provider like us, InterVision and Infinity. Get expert advice. Don't learn this stuff the hard way. We came up with these 7 rules here from our experience, and it's, much as I would love to say that, work with us, there are other people out there who've done this as well, and, so, they have good experience as well. So it is a great time to really look to extend your own IT resources, because as you go through cloud migration, you need to staff up, and then once you get through it, you don't need so many staff at that point. So, you get, if you pull in a partner, you get round-the-clock support, you get managed services. We do work where we fully support environments, both through migration and then afterwards. And then for other clients, we completely hand it off. So it really depends on what you need and what you want. So, thinking about disaster recovery and backup, whether that is the first approach you're taking for the cloud, or whether you're migrating to the cloud and now you need to make sure that all your backups are going to the right place, and how you deal with that is very important, because you may have had backups all well taken care of before, but now you're obviously making changes. So you need to make sure that you're dealing with backups correctly. So if you're going to use DR, though, as an initial way into the cloud, once you understand your different tiers of application from mission critical down to lower priority, you can then mix and match the different architectures in the cloud. You can go with multi-site or hot standby for your mission critical applications, where you've got cloud servers running the whole time and they're part of your production environment, all the way down to just backup and restore if it's a lower priority application. Pilot Light is another great architecture here where you've got a database server effectively running in the cloud the whole time, and the data is getting replicated, mirrored into the cloud as data is updated on-prem. But you've got the servers ready to go, but not actually spun up until you need them. So you've got a real small footprint in the cloud, but you're ready to switch over to it when you need it. So, many different ways to sort of slice and dice how you do DR and backup. So, so number 7, last but not least, really, understanding the interdependencies is absolutely key to really being able to migrate effectively. This hand-drawn picture on the left here is kind of often what we get from clients, something like that, when we ask for documentation around their existing applications and their environments. We may get some documentation, we may not. We use tools that we install that will run against their environment to run and find servers, find applications, figure out or monitor which servers and which applications are interacting, what ports they're interacting on, what type of traffic is going between them. So we end up with a truly accurate picture, source of truth about the current environment. This then lets us identify, the different server stacks that are involved with an application, and then how to, which things need to be migrated together, how we then define security groups, what ports do we need to open up to allow for communication between servers and between applications, because we start out with environments in the cloud that are entirely locked down, right? So that we have the best security in place, and then we just open things up as we need to. We've got security monitoring going on the whole time so that we can see what is being changed. So, generally we get clients into a much more secure environment in the cloud, but it's partly built on just due diligence as we do this kind of upfront network and server assessment. We also like to monitor performance upfront so that we know the performance of applications prior to being moved to the cloud, so that if there are any concerns once we get out there, people are saying, okay, it's not running as fast as it did. We've got true quantitative data to compare to, and then we can analyze and troubleshoot if necessary. So here's the checklist, the 7 golden rules. The strategy. Always important to have a strategy and a vision. Right kind of migration for you at the point you're in. Segmenting your applications, knowing what your applications are, and segmenting them. Focusing on security, upfront and always. Being strategic about how you move your assets. Taking care of backup and disaster recovery, and then understanding the interdependencies. So, those are the things that, the sort of core things we focus on to be successful. And, we take a very transformative approach when we work with clients, and it's focused on the client. So, we introduce the right technology, the right kind of infrastructure, make sure it's resilient to produce a digital workplace. We put it in the right place, the right premise. Public cloud obviously is something we've done a lot of. But InterVision also has done a tremendous amount of on-prem and hybrid cloud. So for a lot of companies these days, it is a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud environment. They've got Azure, they've got AWS, they may have some Google, and they're still in their own data center for certain workloads. And we've got to make all that work together. We've got a ton of experience at that. And can make it work very effectively. So, and then, we, as I was saying before, we can do managed service clients where we manage their environments. We've got professional services and also self-service. So we will fit to what an organization needs to help them overcome their challenge and really, realize the potential that technology can provide for an organization. Technology should enable an organization to do more, to do better, not constrain it. So that's kind of what we are all about. So, we've got a ton of experience, as I was saying, 25 years in cloud and IT, lots of experience with virtualization prior to the cloud. So, we've done all kinds of work. We are the largest AWS public sector partner in the Western U.S., and that's where I'm located. We've got a deep commitment to change, and as a cloud innovator, the cloud technologies are still changing pretty relentlessly. New things are coming out, new improvements, and we've got people that stay up to that daily. So many clients across multiple different industries, so we've kind of understand the different domains, and we've really focused on delivering results on time, on budget for our clients. We've done work not just in migration, but we do a lot of cloud architecture work, which is really where everything starts. We do DevOps, where we're deploying applications, automated testing, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. We do a lot of that sort of work. Cloud storage is another area that's very big for us. We've got a team of data scientists that do machine learning, big data analytics, something that we've done a lot of. We kind of lead in that area. Security, as I said, is something we're completely focused on. SysOps, is key to really automated prevention of issues and then troubleshooting. Disaster recovery, very strong use case in the cloud. We've done lots of migrations, one for CCCTC, California Community Colleges Technology Center. It's one of our bigger clients. We've got over 1,000 AWS EC2 instances, so virtual servers running in the cloud. Done some very large migrations for them where we've got applications that are hit by 4 million students, during enrollment, and standing up to that sort of, that level of transactional volume. So just massive amounts of DNS queries and DNS zones. And then, they themselves have got probably close to 150 technologists developing software that we're working with, doing DevOps, and then also doing increasingly a lot of data lake and data warehousing work with AWS Redshift. So this is a client that really keeps us on our toes because they're pushing the edges of technology the whole time. And we're able to do this because we've got a very large group of very highly certified cloud engineers that have both Microsoft Azure and AWS certifications. We've got, as a company, a lot of credentials there from the Azure side and from the AWS side. And as I was saying earlier, we're starting to get into Google as well. And expect that to grow rapidly because we're seeing a lot more work in that area. So I think that's all I had to say here. So questions?
Yeah, John, we did. Yeah, you were on a roll there, but we did have some questions come in that we can review now. So I'll go ahead and so we already have workloads in AWS and Azure, and our ERP is on-prem. What do we do in this situation?
Well, don't panic. We work with clients, as I was saying, that are multi-cloud and hybrid. So hybrid multi-cloud is an environment that we actually kind of specialize in. In some ways, it's more complex, but it can be a better fit depending on it. If an organization's got a lot of Microsoft-specific workloads, Azure is obviously a good place for those. If they've got a lot of Linux or very high volume, AWS traditionally has dealt with those very well. The ERP would certainly look to get that into the cloud. Depending on what ERP it is, software as a service could be a solution, but a lot of ERPs are heavily integrated with other systems for an organization. So you really want to look at that and see how integrated the ERP is with which other applications and where are those applications. If they're already out in AWS, then that is probably the place to migrate the ERP to. It's a matter, we would often start our work with clients by doing some sort of assessment, digital transformation assessment or cloud assessment. So that's a great place to start to really develop the cloud strategy, the inventory, and figure out, the best, steps forward as a migration approach. So
Great. Thanks, John. So another one is the cloud technology seems to be changing so fast. When's a good time to migrate? When do we know when's the time?
Well, if you hold off and wait for the changing to stop, you're never going to do it. The cloud technology is changing, still changing at a very rapid pace, from all the major vendors. We've got a large team of folks who stay up to date with that and working it day in, day out. So now is the time. If you've got, any of the sort of compelling reasons that we talked about early on, you've got hardware aging out, you've got, data center leases, you really want to become more agile. If you have any of those kinds of reasons, now is the time to do it, to start with the strategy and then figure out which applications go first. But pull in a partner.
Great. So this kind of flows into that, actually. So this person's been reading a lot about some of the bigger security incidents in the cloud space. We've been through this several times. How can we say that it's safe? I mean, is it truly safe?
Yeah. Well, if you do it right, it is more secure. But I mean, if you take AWS S3, which is their simple storage solution, you can put files out there, you can put a static website out there, and it may be that you want to make it accessible to the world, right? So you can go ahead and set it up that way. But if you put files out there that are, very private and very important to an organization, and you make them accessible to the world, then you've got a security issue. So, just like on-prem, when you're setting up environments and, architectures, you need to go about it in the right way. The cloud absolutely can be more secure. You got vendors, AWS, Microsoft, Google, who have got enormous experience, and they're heavily certified and regulated. And therefore, the underlying infrastructure you're working on is more secure, most likely, than your on-prem. But you need to, apply the appropriate processes and architecture in the way you deploy it. It's not hard necessarily because of cloud. You can do infrastructure as code, so you can build out your environments in an automated way, so that once you know that a particular, environment server pattern that you're using is secure, you then reuse that, so you're starting from a strong point of security. But it's kind of in the preparation. So
great. Thanks, John. Hey, would you mind advancing to the next slide? I want to let everybody know how they can continue the conversation if they'd like to.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
if you are interested in a preliminary assessment, which, John, I'm sure you can provide more context as to what that means, you can reach out to Deborah Hatfield here at InterVision. Her contact information is there. Everyone who registered and attended this session will be receiving an email from her, which will contain the recording for the webinar, as well as the opportunity to download the associated white paper for today's conversation, which is the 7 Deadly Sins of Cloud Migration, another angle on essentially the same type of topics. But if you do want to continue the conversation, that's the best way to do so, is just to respond to her and let her know. We did have another question come in, actually, from Chad. Is there a reason why we're staying away from Oracle Cloud, John?
It is, for us, we've done some work with Oracle, but not a ton. So it's, from my standpoint, it's a matter of experience. But if you've got a full-on Oracle stack, right, and we have clients who have that, that's a perfectly viable way to go. I'm out in California, and there's, I think, quite a bit of sort of push against Oracle. So certainly, I'm headquartered in Sacramento, but we are really completely technology agnostic. So the same rules and approaches and lessons learned really apply if you're going with Oracle. If you've got pure Oracle stack, in many ways it's probably the best way to go, because it will simplify things for you. So, and be happy to talk more about it, because we actually do have some experience around it. So, Chris, is that any more questions?
Yep, I think that's good, Chad. If, none more that came in, but Chad, if you want to follow up on that conversation, Deborah will be emailing you those resources, and she can connect you with one of our experts to continue the conversation around the Oracle Cloud. Outside of that, I think that is all the questions. I'm just waiting to make sure nothing else comes in. But thanks again, everyone, for attending. Again, you'll be receiving some follow-up information, and you can connect that way. We definitely appreciate your time, and thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Have a good day.